Hello and welcome to another Mr. Carter Science Special. In this video we'll be looking at photosynthesis and the factors that affect the rates of photosynthesis. So plants make their own food, although more technically they make the carbohydrate glucose by photosynthesis. And this process is a chemical reaction that uses light energy. So the word photosynthesis actually comes from the Greek language, photo meaning light and synthesis meaning to make or join. So photosynthesis just means making with light. The actual definition of photosynthesis is that photosynthesis is a chemical reaction that occurs in green plant cells, whereby energy from sunlight is used to make carbon dioxide and water join together to form glucose and oxygen. This chemical reaction occurs on a molecule called chlorophyll. This particular part of the definition is quite important, as I've seen it occur in a number of different exam questions asking why sunlight or energy is needed in the photosynthesis reaction. The carbon dioxide that's needed will enter the leaf through holes on the underside of the leaf called stomata. And the water that we need in photosynthesis is absorbed through the roots and transported up the stem to the leaf in a tube called the xylem. Both the stomata and the xylem are covered in separate videos, and I'll put the links to those in the comments below. So the word equation for photosynthesis is carbon dioxide plus water gives us glucose plus oxygen. And the symbol equation is carbon dioxide CO2 plus H2O gives us 6CH12O6 plus O2. And in order to balance that correctly, we need to add large sixes before the CO2 and the H2O and before the oxygen. So in fact you have 6 molecules of carbon dioxide plus 6 molecules of H2O water will produce 1 molecule of glucose and 6 molecules of oxygen. We will also of course need light energy and a molecule to help absorb that light energy, which is chlorophyll, found in the chloroplasts of green plant cells. The evidence for photosynthesis comes from a range of different experiments, one of which is shown below, where we have a water plant, a pondweed or Elodea, which is being exposed to the light and it is producing bubbles of oxygen as it photosynthesizes, and we can see that in the short little video here. I'm forever blue. You can see a large number of bubbles being produced and released, and we can actually count the rate of those bubbles, how many per minute, and that will allow us to investigate later on the different factors that will affect the rate of photosynthesis. So how is a leaf adapted in order to be able to carry out a fast rate of photosynthesis? Well, leaves are broad, so we have a large surface area to absorb the light. Leaves are thin, so there's a very short distance for the diffusion of carbon dioxide. Leaves have veins containing the xylem, which carries the water to the leaf, and the phloem, which carries sugars away from the leaf. Leaves have air spaces that contain carbon dioxide needed for photosynthesis. There are guard cells here on the base of the leaf, on the bottom of the leaf, that will allow air containing carbon dioxide into the leaf and water out of the leaf. Those guard cells can also expand and close the stomata at night so that not too much water will be lost. And at the top we have a waxy cuticle, this layer here, which is waterproof and will help to reduce water loss. Another way of explaining that is to say that leaves are adapted to their function by having a cuticle, that is a waterproof layer that stops the leaf losing too much water. The palisade cells have lots of chloroplasts to absorb light energy to make photosynthesis happen. Leaves have a large surface area so they can absorb lots of light energy. The cells of a leaf need to absorb carbon dioxide from the air, and the air gets into the leaf through holes in the bottom of the surface called stomata. And guard cells can close the stomata at night to stop the leaf losing too much water. So let's have a little consideration of this investigation you can see below. This is a classic investigation you should have done in your classroom, whereby you can set up the equipment that we can see, and we have our pondweed again here producing bubbles of oxygen, and we can set the distance of that pondweed, in this case at 30 centimeters away from the light source, a lamp. We can also have a thermometer in there so we can control the temperature. Now this apparatus can be adjusted depending on the independent variable we wish to investigate. For example, if we wish to change the light intensity, we just need to bring the beaker closer to the lamp and that will increase the light intensity. If we want to investigate the effect of temperature on the rate of photosynthesis, all we need to do is keep the light intensity the same by keeping the distance between the lamp and the pondweed exactly the same, but in this case we would change the temperature of the water bath, perhaps by using slightly hotter water each time, or indeed by cooling the water down. And as you've already seen in this little video, we can then count the bubbles of oxygen produced per minute, and that will give us a rate of photosynthesis. Now there are three different factors that will affect the rate of photosynthesis and how much glucose or starch or indeed oxygen is produced by the plant. Light intensity, carbon dioxide and temperature will all affect the rates of photosynthesis. And they will give the following graphs. Here's the light intensity graph, the carbon dioxide graph and the temperature graph. And it's important that you are able to both describe and then explain the shape of these graphs to the examiner in your GCSE exams. So let's have a look at light intensity and how light intensity will affect the rate of photosynthesis. Well, as you can see, there's clearly two different sections to the graph. There's the first section here and then the second section here. And they have two different shapes, so we need to describe and explain them in two different ways. So this first section here, we say that as the light intensity increases, the rate of photosynthesis increases, and we can see that clearly, they go up. And this is because light intensity is the limiting factor. So as we increase light intensity, this allows the plant to make more glucose, more starch, more oxygen. Now in the second part of the graph here, as the light intensity continues to increase, the rate of photosynthesis stays the same. And this is because light intensity is no longer the limiting factor. If we want to increase the rate of photosynthesis, we have to understand that at this point in the graph, carbon dioxide or the temperature is now the limiting factor. So we would have to increase the amount of carbon dioxide or the temperature to continue to increase the rate of photosynthesis. It's important to understand that a limiting factor is anything that will slow down the rate of photosynthesis. So therefore, by giving more of that particular factor, we will increase the rate of photosynthesis. And in this case, in the first section of the graph, light's the limiting factor, and in the second section of our graph, carbon dioxide and temperature are the limiting factors. Now when we investigate carbon dioxide and how carbon dioxide affects the rate of photosynthesis, we end up with a very similar graph. Again, it's in two sections, 1 and 2. So if we take this first section here, we can explain and describe it thus. As the concentration of carbon dioxide increases, the rate of photosynthesis increases, and this is because carbon dioxide is the limiting factor. So more carbon dioxide will allow the plant to make more glucose and more starch. But by the time we get to the second part of the graph, there is an excess of carbon dioxide. So as the concentration of carbon dioxide continues to increase, the rate of photosynthesis stays the same. Carbon dioxide is no longer the limiting factor. The amount of light or temperature is now the limiting factor. The graph for temperature looks a little bit different. So how does temperature affect the rate of photosynthesis? Well, again, we have two sections, one here and then a different section here, one going up, one going down. So let's take that first section and have a look at this first section. As the temperature increases, the rate of photosynthesis increases up to an optimum temperature of around 40 degrees, and this is because temperature is the limiting factor. An increase in temperature allows the plant to make more glucose, more starch, and therefore more oxygen released. However, as the temperature continues to increase above the optimum temperature of 40 degrees, the rate of photosynthesis begins to decrease. And this is because the enzymes that control photosynthesis have been denatured. So the amount of glucose and oxygen made will decrease in this second part of the graph. You may recognize this because you will have seen in the digestion unit when you investigated enzymes. Enzymes will always produce a similar graph to this when we vary temperature. And as we said, because enzymes will be denatured at high temperatures. I hope you've enjoyed watching this short video on photosynthesis and the rates of photosynthesis. If you have, please comment below, let me know what you've learned, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you very much for your time.